Orders of the day numbers 1 and 2.
Education, Freedom of Association Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Employment Relations, Secret Ballot for Strikes Amendment Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House and Committee for further consideration of the Education, Freedom of Association Amendment Bill and consideration of the Employment Relations, Secret Ballot for Strikes Amendment Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. Members, the House is in committee for further consideration of the Education, Freedom of Association Amendment Bill and consideration on the Employment Relations Secret Ballot for Strikes Amendment Bill. Members, we move first to the further consideration of the Education, Freedom of Association Amendment Bill. And when members were last considering this bill, the debate was on Clause 4A and was in progress, and the House was listening to Ian Lees-Galloway, who had the call, and the member for Palmerston North has 4 minutes and 19 seconds remaining, should he so wish to take the call.
To take that call. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I hadn't made it very far into my contribution when we were last considering this bill. Mr. Chair, Clause 4A it really goes to the heart of one of the questions that we on this side of the House have about this bill, because the member in charge of this bill says that she does not want to see the end of student associations and that her intention is not to destroy student associations. But Clause 4A actually amends the original Amendment Act to delete any reference to student associations on the Tertiary Institutes councils. The original clause that it deletes refers to having students on the council in the case of an institution where a membership of student association is compulsory in accordance with the constitution or rules of the association. Now, obviously, this bill changes the compulsory nature, but there's absolutely no need to remove any reference to student associations whatsoever. So I'd like to speak in support of the amendment proposed by Grant Robertson, which is to replace the current Clause 4A with the wording that following an election conducted in accordance with the statutes made by the Council, by the students at the institution, where no student association exists at the institution, or by a student association where such an association exists at the Council and at the institution. And that seems to sit perfectly reasonably with the bill, with the intention of the bill, if the intention of the bill is not to see the end of student associations. And I think the problem with the way the clause is worded at the moment is it's quite inflexible in dealing with how different student associations might be structured at different universities and polytechnics and how they might operate. And I'd like to use the example of the student representation on Massey University's council, because the student associations at Massey actually, there are a number of different student associations that represent the different campuses and the extramural students at Massey University, and they have 3 representatives on the university's council, and they use their right to appoint people to the University Council to ensure that there is adequate representation of internal students, that there is adequate representation of extramural students, and there is adequate representation of Māori students. Now, that has been student directed. That approach to representation on the council has been decided by students, and it can be changed by students because the students have the control over how they are represented on that council. But the current wording of the bill that we are looking at here says that all that power to decide how students would be represented on the council would sit with the institute itself. So the university or the polytechnic or the wānanga or the PTE, whichever sort of organisation we're talking about, they would have the decision-making power about how students would be represented on that institute's council. So the whole point of having student representation on those councils is to ensure that there is a student voice at the highest decision-making body at those institutes. But it is completely undermined by the way the bill is written at the moment, because there would not be students who would get to make that decision about who represents them on the council, or they would not be able to decide the process by which they get to decide who represents them. That would sit solely with the institute itself. And I suppose that the member might make the argument that that students on the council could have a say in that.
Chairman.
Grant Robertson.